AITA for refusing my adopted daughter the inheritance she demanded at my husband's funeral? A short time ago, I lost my husband Adrian after a difficult battle with cancer. He was my partner, my best friend, and for many years the adoptive father of Juliet, our daughter. However, Juliet had left us almost a decade earlier to return to her biological parents, and what happened afterwards shattered everything we ever thought it meant to be a family. It all started many years ago when Adrian and I tried to start a family by any means possible. After several years of unsuccessful fertility treatments and an endless number of nights crying in frustration, we made a decision. We would adopt. More than an alternative, it was a way to give a child a chance at life. That's how we decided to enter the foster care system. That's where we met Juliet. She was 5 years old when she arrived at our home, small and quiet, with a look that seemed to hold all the sadness in the world. From the beginning, we knew her life had been very difficult. Juliet had been removed from the home of her biological parents, Manon and Hugo, who had a long history of substance abuse and neglect. According to social worker reports, Juliet had lived in deplorable conditions, without enough food, without basic medical care, and surrounded by episodes of violence. It was incredible that such a small child could have survived so much. I remember the first day she came home. Adrian and I had prepared her room with so much love, walls painted a soft lavender color, a bed full of pillows, and her name written in decorative letters on the door. But when Juliet saw that, she didn't smile. Instead, she tightly hugged an old blanket she had brought with her and sat in a corner, looking at us with distrust. It was at that moment that we understood her trust wouldn't be something easily earned, and we were willing to dedicate all the time necessary. The first months were a challenge. Juliet didn't talk much, and she often had nightmares. She used to hide food in her pockets or under the bed, as if she feared she would never eat again. Adrian and I made sure to be patient, to show her she was safe with us. Slowly, she began to open up. Her first smile came one day when we baked cookies together. That small gesture, a shy curve on her lips, made us cry with happiness. It was as if, little by little, we were helping her heal. After a year of being her foster family, we decided to officially adopt her. It was one of the happiest days of our lives. In court, Adrian and I held hands while the judge declared that Juliet was now legally our daughter. She didn't fully understand what it meant at the time, but upon leaving the building, she took my hand and called me Mom for the first time. Adrian, always the strong man, had to step away for a moment to dry his tears. Over time, Juliet began to flourish. She loved princess stories, frilly dresses, and especially birthdays. Every year, she got more excited about cake and presents. Although Adrian and I were careful not to overload her with material things, we wanted her to learn to value what she had, not just yearn for what she didn't. For a while, everything was perfect. However, things began to change when Juliet reached adolescence. At 12 years old, she became more aware of what her peers had: phones, designer clothes, trips abroad. Although Adrian and I never had financial problems, we were in a wealthy family. We lived comfortably, but we also worked hard to maintain that standard of living. Juliet, however, began to desire more. At 14, she started asking for things that were out of our reach: the latest phone model, designer clothes, vacations in exotic places. At first, we thought it was just a phase, something normal in a teenager. But her demands became increasingly frequent and more expensive. Adrian tried to talk to her, explaining that our family had to prioritize things like education and stability, but Juliet always responded with frustration. "You don't understand what it's like to live like me. I want," she used to tell us. That phrase broke my heart because she seemed to ignore everything we had done for her. But the worst was yet to come. When Juliet turned 17, we noticed that she was starting to distance herself from us. She spent more time away from home, saying she was with friends, but never giving us details. Her outings with friends turned into long absences, and she always seemed upset with us. Adrian tried to get closer to her, but every conversation ended in arguments. "You don't understand my life," was her favorite phrase. I kept thinking it was a teenage phase, something that would eventually pass, but deep down, Adrian and I knew that something else was happening. On her 18th birthday, the situation finally exploded. Adrian and I had planned a small celebration at home, something intimate, just the three of us. We baked her favorite cake, decorated the dining room with balloons, and bought a gift we knew she would love: a professional camera. Juliet had always had a talent for photography, and we wanted to support her in that. However, she arrived late, with a cold and distant attitude. She barely looked at the cake or the gifts before dropping the news that would change our lives forever. "My biological parents have contacted me," she said suddenly, as if it were a casual comment. Adrian and I looked at each other in silence, trying to process what we had just heard. We didn't know what to answer. For years, the subject of her biological parents had been something Juliet avoided, and we had respected her silence. Although the adoption had been closed, we knew that someday she might want to look for them. But we never imagined that they would be the ones to look for her first. They want to see me. They've changed now. They have a stable life, and they want to reconnect with me. Juliet continued in a tone that left no room for discussion. I tried to ask her how it had happened, but she simply showed me an email on her phone. It was a long message written by Manon, her biological mother. In it, Manon explained how she and Hugo had overcome their substance abuse and built a successful life. They now ran a real estate business and lived in an exclusive neighborhood. They wanted to meet Juliet and ask for a second chance. "And what do you think about all this?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Juliet looked at me with that expression she had started using lately, a mixture of superiority and disdain. "I've already made a decision. I'm going to see them." Adrian tried to intervene, explaining that she should be careful and that this might not be as simple as it seemed. But Juliet abruptly interrupted him. "They can offer me things you can't. I want to know what it's like to live with my real family." Those words were like a knife straight to the heart. Her real family. And what were we, then? Adrian tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Juliet ended the conversation saying she was only going to meet them out of curiosity, but deep down, we both knew there was more behind her decision. During the following months, Juliet started spending more time with Manon and Hugo. She always had excuses for not being at home. "I'm going to study with friends. I have a group project. I'm sleeping over at Sophia's house." It wasn't until later that we discovered that all those excuses were lies. She had been visiting her biological parents, who lived in a mansion that was probably worth more than everything Adrian and I had earned in our lives. Every time we tried to talk to Juliet about what was happening, she shut down. "It's none of your business," she would tell us. Until one day, shortly after turning 18, she came to a definitive decision. "I'm moving in with Manon and Hugo. I think they can offer me a better life." Those words broke everything that was left of our relationship. Adrian tried to reason with her, reminded her of everything we had done for her since she was a scared and vulnerable little girl. But Juliet didn't want to listen. "You did what you could, but they are my real parents," she said, as if that were enough to justify her decision. In less than a week, Juliet had packed her things and moved out. There were no emotional goodbyes, no hugs or tears from her. She simply thanked us in a cold and distant way and walked out of our house forever. Adrian and I stood silently at the door, watching her get into the luxurious car Manon had sent to pick her up. That night, Adrian didn't say a single word. He just sat in his favorite armchair and stared at the wall, as if everything we had built over the past years had disappeared in a matter of days. I, for my part, went to the bathroom, closed the door, and cried until I had no tears left. What had we done wrong? At what point did we lose our daughter? After Juliet left, Adrian and I tried to get our lives back on track. But the house felt empty. Every corner reminded us of her. The chair at the table where she used to sit, the photo albums full of happy memories, even the childhood drawings that we had proudly framed and hung on the walls. Everything seemed like a bitter mockery of what we had lost. For the first few months, we tried to keep in touch with her. We sent her messages asking how she was, if she needed anything, if she wanted to come over for dinner someday. But our efforts were always ignored. The few replies we received were cold and distant. "I'm fine. Thanks. I don't have time now." Eventually, we understood that Juliet had decided to erase our presence from her life. The only thing we knew about her was what we could see on social media. She posted photos with Manon and Hugo in exotic locations, dinners at expensive restaurants, designer clothes. "My family," she wrote in the descriptions, as if Adrian and I had never existed. Every post was like a dagger to the heart, but we decided it was best to stop looking. We had lost our daughter, and nothing we did would change that. Adrian took it worse than I did. He had always had a special connection with Juliet, and seeing her reject everything we had built together shattered him. He stopped talking about her altogether, as if ignoring her existence could ease the pain. But I knew it was consuming him inside. One night while organizing things in the attic, I found a box full of Juliet's mementos, her drawings, her school reports, photos from her first days with us. When I showed the box to Adrian, he looked at it for a moment before pushing it away with a sharp gesture. "I can't," he simply said, his eyes full of tears. The years passed, and although the pain never completely disappeared, we learned to live with it. We stopped talking about Juliet, not because we wanted to forget her, but because remembering only brought more suffering. Our relationship changed. Before, we were a team facing everything together. But now, there was a void between us that no conversation could fill. Then 3 years ago, our lives took another turn. Adrian started feeling unwell, weight loss, constant fatigue, pain that never seemed to go away. After months of tests and doctor visits, the diagnosis came: advanced liver cancer. It was a devastating blow, a tragedy that seemed to add to the pain we had already been carrying. From that moment on, Our lives revolved around treatments, hospital visits, and desperate hope. Adrian fought with all his strength, but the cancer was relentless. During those years, I thought about Juliet many times. Would she know what was happening? Would she care? Would she come if she knew her adoptive father was dying? We never found out. We didn't try to contact her, and she never showed any sign of interest. However, I can't help but think that Juliet knew what was happening. Although she had blocked us, she was still in contact with some of her childhood friends, who surely would have told her about Adrian's illness. But she never appeared, never called, never asked. During those years, Adrian and I talked many times about what we would do if Juliet decided to return. If she comes back, it won't be for us, he said one night with a bitter look. It will be because she needs something. I wanted to believe he was wrong, that there was still something of the girl we had raised in her. But deep down, I knew he was right. Adrian passed away a few weeks ago. The end was quick, almost a relief after all the suffering he had endured. Organizing the funeral was an exhausting experience. I had to be strong to honor him, but inside, I felt like I was collapsing. My family and friends were there to support me, but there was one person whose absence was notable. A part of me wanted Juliet to appear, even just to say goodbye to Adrian. But I also feared what might happen if she did. The day of the funeral was somber. We were surrounded by people who had known and loved Adrian, remembering his kindness, his dedication, and everything he had done for others. I was standing next to the casket, receiving hugs and words of comfort, when suddenly I saw her, Juliet. She wasn't alone. She was walking confidently towards me, dressed in black and wearing dark sunglasses, as if she wanted to project an image of seriousness. Beside her, a man I didn't recognize, tall, dressed in an expensive suit, and carrying a briefcase. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. But no, it was her. After all these years, my adopted daughter was there. And she didn't seem to have come to say goodbye to Adrian. The moment Juliet appeared at the funeral was so shocking that I froze. Beside her, the man in the suit carried a briefcase, as if he were about to negotiate a contract, not in a place where one says goodbye to a loved one. I couldn't process what I was seeing. After 8 years without seeing her, my daughter was there, but her presence didn't seem to bring regret or reconciliation. She approached slowly, taking off her sunglasses, trying to show an expression that might have passed for sadness if it weren't for the calculated something in her demeanor. "I'm so sorry about Adrian," she said almost in a whisper, though her voice didn't sound sincere. There were no tears, just a distant expression. Before I could respond, she continued, "I know it's been many years, but I needed to be here. There's also something we need to discuss." My heart sank. At that moment, I understood that Juliet hadn't come to say goodbye to Adrian nor to offer comfort. She had come with another agenda. Discuss what? I asked coldly, maintaining my composure in front of all the attendees. "The will," she said bluntly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The man beside her stepped forward and introduced himself. "I'm Nicholas, Juliet's lawyer. I'm here to advise her regarding the inheritance." Rage washed over me. I looked around, hoping no one else had heard that. It was Adrian's funeral, the man who had been her father, the man who had sacrificed everything for her. And she had arrived with a lawyer to claim what she considered hers. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain control, but my voice came out firm and harsh. "Inheritance. You come here after years of silence to talk about money." "I just want to make sure things are fair," Juliet replied, her tone haughty. Those words made me see red inside. Fair? Where was that concern for fairness when Adrian was sick and you didn't even bother to call? Fair, I repeated, almost spitting the word. You talk about fairness at the funeral of a man you abandoned. Where were you when Adrian needed you? Where were you when we were fighting to save him? The lawyer tried to intervene, but I raised my hand to stop him. This is between Juliet and me. You have nothing to do here. Juliet seemed taken aback by my reaction. I don't know if she expected me to welcome her with open arms or simply accept her demand without question. But by that time, I'd had enough. I went to the bag I was carrying and took out an envelope I had prepared days earlier. It was a letter from Adrian. He had written it months before he died, anticipating that something like this might happen. We knew that if Juliet appeared, it wouldn't be out of love or regret, but out of greed. "This is the only thing Adrian left for you," I said, handing her the envelope. Juliet took it with trembling hands while all the attendees watched in silence. I knew I was being cruel by doing it there, in front of everyone, but I couldn't allow her to continue desecrating Adrian's memory. Juliet opened the envelope and began to read. Her face went through a series of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. In the letter, Adrian had been brutally honest. There were no words of affection or nostalgia, only a harsh and direct truth. "Juliet, if you are reading this, it means you decided to return, although I'm sure it's not for the right reasons. During the years you were gone, we never stopped thinking about you. But we also understood something important. We were no longer your family. Not because we decided it, but because you did. You chose your biological parents and abandoned us without looking back. Now that I'm gone, you're probably here hoping to receive something of what I've left behind. Let me be clear. Everything I own, everything I built, belongs to Olivia, my true family. You are not entitled to anything. It doesn't hurt me to write this, because I know it's the right thing to do. I hope that someday you find the purpose and peace that seem to have been missing for so many years, but it won't be with my help. When Juliet finished reading, her hands were shaking. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to process what she had just read. But when she opened them again, they were filled with fury. "This is unfair," she said, raising her voice. But before she could continue, I interrupted her. "No, Juliet," I said calmly, although my heart was pounding. "What was unfair was Adrian spending his last years wondering what we did wrong, why you abandoned us. What was unfair was that you never called him, never asked how he was, even when you knew he was dying. This letter is the fairest thing there is." Juliet started to cry, but her tears didn't move me. For years, I had seen those tears as an expression of genuine pain. But now, I only saw them as a tool, a form of manipulation. Her lawyer tried to say something, but I silenced him with a look. "I suggest you leave," I told Juliet, my voice firm. "This is not your place. It never will be again." She looked at me, perhaps hoping I would change my mind. But I remained still. After a few moments, she turned and left, taking her lawyer with her. When they walked out the door, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I wouldn't have to face her betrayal anymore. Sadness because the girl I once loved had disappeared forever. After Juliet left the funeral, the rest of the day passed in a blur of emotions. The friends and family who were present tried to comfort me, but I could barely process what had happened. Anger, sadness, and a strange sense of closure mingled in my mind, leaving little room for anything else. That night, after everyone had left and the house was silent, I sat in the living room with a glass of wine and looked at the photos that still decorated the walls. Many of them included Juliet, her first days with us, her first day of school, our family vacations at the beach. At what point had everything gone so wrong? How did we get to this point, where the girl we had loved with all our hearts had become a stranger? Someone so far removed from who we were that she didn't even seem like the same person. In the following days, I tried to move on. I started organizing Adrian's belongings, a task that was as painful as it was necessary. I found letters, notes, and small reminders of our life together. But what impacted me the most was a journal Adrian had been writing during his last months. He had hidden it in his desk drawer, and when I opened it, I discovered pages filled with his most intimate thoughts. One entry in particular broke my heart. I always thought the love we gave Juliet would be enough to keep us together. But I think I never understood how much she longed for something we couldn't offer her. I can't blame her for wanting more, but it hurts that she never saw what she had right in front of her. I don't know if we'll ever get her back. But if not, I hope Olivia moves on without that burden. She has been my rock, and I want her to find peace, even if that means leaving Juliet in the past. I cried when I read those words. Adrian had understood what I didn't want to accept, that sometimes there are people who simply don't want to be part of your life. And no matter how hard you try, you can't force them to stay. About a week after the funeral, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Juliet. The text was long, full of apologies and explanations. She said she felt lost, that she had never wanted to hurt us, but that she had been swept away by the glamour and promises of a better life that her biological parents offered her. She also mentioned that her relationship with Manon and Hugo had ended badly. According to Juliet, after a few years of living together, they began to tire of her attitude and her financial dependence. Finally, they kicked her out of their house, and since then, she had been struggling to support herself. "I made a lot of mistakes," she wrote, "but I want to fix things with you, Mom. Please give me a chance." I read the message several times, but I didn't know how to respond. On the one hand, part of me wanted to give her that chance, wanted to believe she was sincere. But the other part, the one that remembered the damage she had caused and the coldness with which she had treated us, couldn't ignore what had happened. I decided not to respond immediately. I saved the message and tried to focus on my work, on rebuilding my life without Adrian. However, Juliet didn't give up. A few days later, she showed up at my house. She was different, thinner, more tired, with an air of desperation I had never seen in her before. "Please, Mom," she said when I opened the door. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I don't know where else to go." I didn't let her in. Instead, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "Juliet, this isn't the time," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm dealing with my own grief. I can't carry yours too." She started to cry, but this time her tears didn't affect me as before. I had built a wall around my heart, one that I couldn't allow myself to tear down so easily. I'm so sorry, she said between sobs. I know I did everything wrong, but I just want a chance to prove to you that I've changed. Juliet, I replied, my voice firm but not cruel. Adrian gave you all the love he had. So did I. But you chose to leave us behind, and it wasn't just once. You left us for years. And when you came back, you did so to demand something that wasn't yours. How can I trust that this is different? She had no answer. She just kept crying. And after a moment, she left. I didn't know if she would return. And at that moment, I didn't care. The time had come to take care of myself, to honor Adrian's memory, and to find the peace he always wanted me to have.